إني ألقى الإيناس في صومي وصلاتي ودعائي للرحمن وجميع الطاعات.
Right, so the first thing that needs to be understood is that as Muslims we see science as a positive thing. That is because we believe it attempts to come to terms with what we believe is God's natural creation. Also, unlike our Christian counterparts, we haven't had this sort of history where you have a massive divide between the religious institutions and science. And also, unlike our Christian counterparts, we haven't had to retreat in our hermeneutical approach. In other words, the verses that talk about the heavens and the earth, the verses that talk about the creations of the heavens and the earth and the things that God has, we believe, created, those verses, we maintain a literalistic account of those verses, and we haven't had to resort to metaphorizing those verses when they are clearly not intended as metaphors. Now, whilst Muslims will maintain that there is a close relationship between the Quran or Islam and science, we will also say there ought not to be a perfect relationship between the Quran, Islam and science. And this brings me to my main point, that science itself is not perfect. And I'm going to outline 2 reasons why I believe that is the case. Right, so the first point I want to make is what Thomas Kuhn called a paradigm shift. Now, science can undergo what is referred to as a paradigm shift. And a paradigm shift is literally not only do scientific facts change, actual scientific facts, but the whole framework through which these facts operate also change. Now, that happened at the time of sort of Newton / Einstein. So there was a shift, a complete paradigm shift from Newtonian physics to Einsteinian physics. That's an established reality, and people of philosophy of science will know this. Another example is the fact that you had the assumption that the universe always existed, and this is called steady state theory. And this moved to the expanding universe model, Big Bang / expanding universe model, which of course meant the following. It meant that at one stage the Quran contradicted science, because the Quran makes it very clear that the universe did indeed have an explicit beginning. Steady state theory was completely against that, and thus there was no reconciliation whatsoever between steady state theory and the Quran. So at one stage the Islamic narrative contradicted established fact, scientific fact, but science came to agree with the Quranic narrative afterwards. So this is the first point. Right, so the second point that I want to make is what is commonly referred to as the problem of induction. Now, induction attempts to make sort of broad generalizations on specific samples. Now, the problems of induction are many, which are sort of enumerated by David Hume. One of them is that it's very difficult to make estimations based on a select sample, or it's very difficult to make estimations based on past experiences, on future events. So these are all sort of problems that are associated with induction, and these problems cause deep and dangerous complications for those who see science, or the theory of evolution, to be more specific here and use a contemporary example, the theory of evolution as an absolute certainty that is not prone to any kind of change. Now, Muslims, unlike our Christian literalist young earth creationist counterparts, we don't have to believe, for example, that the universe is only a couple of days old or a couple of thousand years old. We can come to the conclusion that the universe is X billion, whatever it is, years old. And we don't have any problem in rejecting things like adaptation or speciation, or the fact that dinosaurs, existed, or any of these things. But we clearly are under obligation to reject human evolution. Right, so bearing this in mind, I have only 2 questions to ask someone who takes evolution as an unchangeable certainty or an ultimate truth, to which, if you can answer in the positive only then can you quench my skeptical thirst. So the first question is, can you guarantee that there will be no paradigm shift in the field of biology, the like of which we've already witnessed in physics? That's the first question. The second question is, can you solve the problem of induction so that you can get enough sample evidences to make a complete generalization in evolution, or human evolution in particular? These are my questions, and that is my case. And I really want to ask you for a favor, really. I have a request to make to you. And it consists of 2 words. Fight back. That's right. Fight back. I've made my points clear. I've elucidated on my questions. So it's time for you to fight back. Write an article. Make a video response. Let's see what you have to say to these questions that I've posed. So I've been describing evolution as if it's a fact, as if it's a fact really. I've been taking that for granted, a fact of science. Whether evolution can, by its very nature, because it takes millions of years to take place, fulfill the scientific sort of textbook definition of science for something which is an observed phenomena, I'll leave that up to the viewer. I'm not gonna, just go back and forth with you guys. You can decide that. It's actually irrespective. It doesn't matter. It's because then you still have the 2 questions that you have to answer, even if it is a fact. But you have to understand that biologists' understanding of evolution has undergone a kind of cosmetic surgery in the 20th century. That is because basically you had microbiology and sort of new understanding of genetics, which had to be incorporated into Darwinism or Darwinian evolution to create what you call the Neo-Darwinian evolution or Neo-Darwinian evolution. So as a result of these changes, one can actually come to the conclusion that evolution is evolving, it's changing, is moving around. Even, if you look at the fossil record, because evolution, a big part of the theory of evolution depends upon the fossil record, and there have been massive changes as a result of the new discoveries, new fossil discoveries. So for example, Lucy, obviously discovered in 1974, is a fossil, and people had to, biologists had to come back to the drawing board, continuously go back to the drawing board and try and reconfigure the theory of evolution based on this new fossil. Another change that took place is the Neanderthal man, and now instead of it being a new fossil that people have found, it's new classifications now. So Neanderthal man was our anatomical cousin, right? And then he was reclassified to being our anatomical brother. Even, to be honest, a very famous controversy within the early 21st century, you could say, or 20th/21st century, is the sort of controversy of Stephen Gould. So he made a theory or thesis called punctuated equilibrium, which is actually contrasted. It's a contrast to Neo-Darwinian evolution. One could say he steps out of Neo-Darwinian evolution. So there's a new explanation now for how human beings or how different creatures evolved, which is not the standard Darwinian evolution explanation. So look at the changes that have taken place and continuously change already with the theory of evolution. There are so many changes that it's very hard to maintain that there won't be any new fossils or there won't be any new reclassifications that will render parts of the theory perhaps null and void. So think about that. The fact that evolution is evolving is a testament to the fact, really, that it can continue to change, and new evidences can come in and be incorporated and undermine old evidences. How can you maintain that? It's a certain reality in this case. And if you want to maintain that it's certain and it's a thing that happens for sure, you'd still have to take a step back, and you'd have to be open-minded and think, all of these changes have happened. What is guaranteeing us that continuous change will not continue to happen? Think about it. So what really astonishes me is that people really do take evolution as almost like a religion. It becomes so deeply entrenched in people's minds that it becomes almost like a religion. And a scientist's job is meant to be to attempt to falsify evidences. But unfortunately, because of the atmosphere that has been created in the 21st century here, with new age atheism, there's like a vehement stubbornness about ideas. This has created an atmosphere where people actually want to go and create a self-fulfilling prophecy in relation to this field of evolution. And this makes people look really bad, like Lord Kelvin, who's meant to be, a massive scientist. He made a speech publicly in the 1900s, and he said that we know everything we need to know about physics. And then 4 or 5 years later, Einstein came with his special theory of relativity. So you have to understand that science is an instrumental way of understanding the world around us. It's pragmatic, it changes. So, that's what you have to understand. But look, if you, like me, appreciate the scientific method, we all appreciate the scientific. It's something that unites people. It's a rational recourse, and you're someone who appreciates it. Then realize that the science itself is not concerned with certain things, like meaning or morals. It doesn't concern those things at all. So if you have this kind of craving for certainty, that can only be satiated with the question, what is my purpose in life? That can only be satiated with that question. And look, going back to science, if we relate it to the Quranic narrative, the Quranic narrative is, interestingly, despite all the things we've said, it can be, if you look at all of the verses that talk about creation, literally in the Quran, those verses can be correlated with even in the light of 21st century scientific discovery. In other words, you can appreciate those verses in the light of 21st century discoveries. So this is really an interesting part of the Quranic narrative, and it shows you, and it makes a really strong case, really, for the timelessness of the Quran. Are you going to subscribe? Or what? Huh? Are you going to just come on the channel and and not subscribe? You got to subscribe to the channel.
ودعائي للرحمن وجميع الطاعات إني ألقى الإناس في صومي وصلاتي ودعائي للرحمن وجميع الطاعات